私はナナって役だから、ももちゃんはイアンって書いてある下を読んでくれる？
I think I prefer calling you Hachi.
Cold Open for this one featured Momoko studying her Japanese and doing well enough with her reading and pronunciation, but her writing needed a little work.
Help!
Now you see, this is what happens when you let your kids learn how to write kanji from Power Rangers Samurai. Seriously, there's a specific stroke order to this stuff, and yet they mess it up almost all the time.
The episode proper then had the Ojamajo discussing how their schoolwork was going, and of course, Momoko explained how she wasn't exactly feeling her Japanese writing skills, which, yeah, are often the biggest hurdles for learning a language, at least for me. As while I did major in Japanese, it was mostly because I could speak it well and read maybe like 60% of the kanji put in front of me, but writing was always a pain. Not only do I seldom even write English these days, but as I just said, there are some very exact processes to writing kanji that, while not an absolute law or anything, it is considered disrespectful if you don't do it right. Thankfully, her friends were willing to help her study, in particular Oppu, who decided to show her what a real hardworking elementary school student looked like by taking her with her to her idol jobs.
Oh, come on. Working in the entertainment industry at such a young age could never have any negative effects on anyone. Is that right, Macaulay? See? You had a great time.
Anyway, after showing off her reading skills, or more likely just being able to read this basic hiragana and then remembering her friend's last name, Momoko was able to see every single step that went into Oppu getting ready for her roles. This of course included makeup, picking out the right dress, and memorizing her script, which seems to be a bit more of an optional bit of prep for many performers these days at any age.
But hey, you gotta make sure you're winning all of those arguments on X, am I right?
Anyway, this did nicely coincide with Momoko's storyline, as Oppu did need someone to act against, and thus the yellow Ojamajo needed to read along with her. Obviously, she was no actress, and frankly I think Oppu was just being nice here, but regardless, it did act as a nice on-the-spot kanji lesson, as like reading a manga in Japanese that you like, it does help when you're actually engaged in reading in some way, in this case helping out a friend. Good stuff, though I do question what sort of movie were they filming?
イアン、待って、行かないで。
ダメなんだ。僕は行かなくちゃ。
These stupid YA novel adaptations are all starting to look the same to me.
Following this, the only thing left on Oppu's schedule were just 3 little interviews, which did at least give her time to take a break and enjoy a tasty looking bento.
音符ちゃん、インタビューの時間繰り上がっちゃったの。これからロビーで始めますって。
Well, okay, after doing that interview where she answered just a bunch of nothing questions, she was able to go back and enjoy her bento and...
音符ちゃん、次のインタビューすぐ始めたいって。
Yeah. Hey, Macaulay, do you have any suggestions?
He turns to Uber Eats.
Makes sense to me.
Jokes aside, and while there might have been some exaggeration here, I'm also glad that they're not overly sugarcoating how demanding Oppu's idol schedule was, to the point that they're not even giving her time to eat a decent meal. All of this just because she had to answer some rather repetitive interviews and give answers that were likely approved by her agency. And sure, you could say that they were trying to make her situation seem less severe than what the real thing would be, but really, even Oppu's smile here felt a little fake, like she knows the industry is slowly draining her soul. And yet, she still wanted to continue, even as the jobs were getting a little more questionable.
グラビア撮影と雑誌に載せる写真を撮ること。
Yeah, just some normal pictures, usually around pools.
I mean, granted, it was still mostly G-rated stuff, but still, it's kind of insane to make a little girl wear a swimsuit at 8 in the morning, as that's gonna be pretty damn cold, especially if it's any season in Japan aside from summer. Meanwhile, the other Ojamajo were becoming antsy and wanted to see what their friends were doing in spite of having a bakery that they needed to run. Thus, they had to try to appeal to their toad boss to get the day off.
人も知らない人の中で叩かれ踏まれめちゃめちゃにされてるんじゃないかしら。
Hazuki, have you kind of forgotten what sort of show you're in? I mean, I know I just said I appreciate the show for tackling some more mature subject matters, but you don't have to actually raise the rating.
I would say this could be like one of those jokes like in Animaniacs that go over kids' heads, but in this case, I actually really hope it flew over their heads so that I could at least feel less guilty over laughing at it. But yeah, eventually their crocodile tears, and let's be honest here, gaslighting convinced Majorika to let them go see them. With that, the Ojamajo made their way to the TV studio.
ガードマン、受付もあれ、どうし してくれそうもないわね。
What? Do you see that you're advertising for another Hocus Pocus reboot?
I'm not entirely kidding, as it is a television studio, and at the very least, it would be less creepy than turning into ladybugs. Yeah, I'm sorry, but flying bugs just freak me the hell out. Thus, kind of rightfully, people tried to swat them down, so they transformed back in a bathroom. Well, okay, now that they were at least past the security guards, they could probably just walk around as little witches in this TV studio and...
もっと目立たないものに変身しなきゃ。
Y'all just really like to overcomplicate things, don't ya?
Anyway, the remainder of this episode would mostly just be about Ompu and Momoko, and this would end up kind of killing off the plot pacing. Like again, I get what they were trying to do here with getting across Ompu's frustrations in trying to record her new single, but a certain section that we'll get to in just a bit kept making her flub up, and Rumi Shishido actually did a great job portraying this, and Ompu getting progressively worse with each demoralizing retake. That said, I do think it would have helped if they didn't show as much of the song each time, or maybe even cut out one of the retake sequences, as it was getting a little too repetitive for the viewers and not just Ompu. If anything, it would have allowed for a little more time for what's clearly going to be the main event of this episode. Anyway, not too surprisingly, especially considering who she was with for most of the episode, the flub point was the part of the song where Ompu needed to say a very ironic English phrase. In her case, she actually was kind of enacting these lyrics by wanting to pronounce those words just as well as Momoko, ignoring the fact that English was currently her primary language, so of course she would sound better than her. This of course touched more on the ongoing cultural exchange theme of the season that again we'll get to in just a bit, but I also really like how this highlighted Ompu's pride as an idol, pushing her a little too hard. I mean, yeah, after her character development in the first episode, she was nowhere near as haughty as she used to be, but as we saw in this very episode, she was still working really hard on her idol commitments, so it was only natural that she would want to be the best of the best after literally starving herself for her art.
It's stuff like this that I actually hope that they include in the next Precure season. I mean, they can do all the friendship stuff and all that, but at the same time, yeah, the idol industry can be pretty damn cutthroat when you get down to it.
Fortunately, Momoko made her realize that it was fine if her English pronunciation seemed a little off to her, because really, that can be quite subjective. This is especially true for the English language, as there are many accents out there, like in New York where she used to live.
ニューヨークにはいろいろな国の人が住んでいて、同じ英語を喋ってもみんな発音が違う。
Most of all, they seem to be really good with their sign language.
I mean, yeah, NY has and always will be a good example of a melting pot of cultures, but let's not ignore how that stew has started to overflow a little. Regardless, it was a nice moment between the witches that reinvigorated Ompu. Though, and also the rest of the Ojamajo were there, after kind of a superfluous bit of them trying several different disguises to get around, or to drop them once they said they were with Ompu. From there, the episode just kind of became a music video as Ompu recorded her song, and yeah, it was pretty catchy and uplifting. Obviously, we can't really play anything on this site, but just take our word for it and appreciate how Ompu was having a fun time. And with that, the episode ended with the Ojamajo playing some Cookie Scrabble, which sounds like fun, except for the Scrabble part. Yeah, I was never good at that game.
This was a pretty solid episode with some good tunes to it.
And I think it was pretty clear that one of the major highlights of this episode was supposed to be that little music video at the end, which was good, though I also would have appreciated if a few other plot points got a little more attention too.
As a result, and while I can't really say much negative about this, I also can't really point out anything that stood out, at least compared to previous episodes.
This episode had some rather intriguing elements to it, in particular highlighting the hardships of being a young child star. Surprisingly, especially for a big company like Toei, they didn't romanticize too much and made it clear that it is demanding work. As a result, it did make Ompu a pretty amiable character for pushing through all of it, likely often on an empty stomach. It would have been nice to see her struggle a little more through the difficulties of the production side of things, but instead they kind of shifted more towards this season's themes of cultural exchange, which was also good. I mean, the idea of there being many different ways of interpreting a language through accents and the like is very true, and rather reassuring for anyone trying to learn a new language. That said, it did result in both plot points not fully clicking like maybe about 8% of the way, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just kind of left me wanting more, as both are good points of discussion. Perhaps they would have had the time if they had exercised some of the more superfluous elements like the not too funny antics of the other Ojamajo, and maybe not put so much into the just okay music video sequence at the end of the episode. Though well, it was still overall a solid enough episode for Ompu's idol struggles and her interactions with Momoko. While nothing too much was lost in translation, I think it would have helped if certain other characters had just kind of quieted down a little.
Thanks for watching, and well, here's to a whole new year of videos to come.
On top of my weekend videos about to become rather chaotic with like 3 shows I have to cover at the same time, we are also planning on returning to some previous series, considering that they're about to get some nice little continuations very soon.
So, look forward to all that. Until then, though, for now, my friends, and, hey, fun fact of the day, this detergent makes for good vermin killer.